continue our conversations around the financial markets and the economy. As we all know, the creative industry is a very critical aspect of the economy, and we hope to have conversations on how we can improve investment in that space, which is very critical. Globally, you can see the impact of the creative industry in job creation, creating value, and also contributing to the gross domestic product of the economy. And so we expect to have an industry leader, Mr. Chinyota Akpobome, also known as Alibaba Ace Comedian, and of course, a very robust industry leader to give his thoughts. But while we will wait for him to join us virtually, we have in the studio Mr. Bosun Omofaye.
Good morning.
CEO for Africa Reports. Nice to have you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me again.
It's been a very busy week. Busy week of decisions, reports, analysis.
Yes.
First began with the National Bureau of Statistics telling us that the economy grew by 1.87%, and then went on to getting the capital importation report of about $5 billion coming into the economy.
Yes.
But for me, I mean, I was not really impressed with the fact that foreign direct investment is 3%, about $215 million, while foreign portfolio investment continues to take the front burner with over 70%.
The lion's share.
$4 billion.
The lion's share.
And then, of course, the Central Bank of Nigeria. Some people saw it, but most of the analysts, economists, kept saying be dovish, hold. They were so confident that they would hold. And, of course, the Central Bank yesterday announced that they reduced the MPR by 100 basis points.
That was a soccer punch. That was a soccer punch. That was a soccer punch. I was a bit in a dilemma as to what. Initially, my thoughts were that the central bank or the monetary policy would wait till July. They will try to be a bit hawkish until then. But then when the GDP numbers came in from the Bureau of Statistics Office, and I said, okay, perhaps this is something that we can use at the monetary side. Considering the fact that I know that the central bank had been at the forefront of both monetary, one finger in the monetary policy, the others in the fiscal policy. There's been a very more of a robust or better fiscal coordination between the Ministry of Finance, the DMO, the National Planning, the Office of the President, and the Central Bank, and that the Central Bank seems to have his hand as this overarching view of things. So looking at the rapid actions that have been taken with the COVID-19, with the management of the FX, the exchange rate, the interventions in the healthcare sectors, in the manufacturing, the previous policies, interventions around agriculture, 41, 43 items, and what have you, land border closure. I think over time, these policies seem to have sit well with the fiscal authorities and with the monetary policy and the central bank. So we have a bit of an unorthodox way of doing things, and it seems to be working, considering our own peculiar environment. The major shock, therefore, has to do with the oil industry, price, demand, and supply. So the 1.87 first quarter GDP came out of the blue. The number of folks expected that our Q1 would be negative. Then it came in lower than the previous quarter, but still in the positive region. So the central bank took that. I think the monetary policy guys took that. Again, let's note that this was the first time in recent times that all members will vote in favor of a rate cut.
Unanimous decision.
Yes, so it was unanimous, even though some voted for 200, 721. That's how I think eventually the consensus was 100. I think a few members of the MPC decided on 200 basis points. But this is the first time that we had a consensus of all the 10 members in attendance that they're voting for a cut. There was no single vote for a hold, no single vote for a hike. That means that there is a consensus moving forward that the MPC is on the same page with the fiscal authorities as the need to lower interest rates to support economic growth. That, for me, was that was a major takeaway. The second point had to do with the optimism, and I think guided optimism of the central bank, and which the governor spoke about like twice. He re-emphasized that twice in his presentation, that Nigeria can escape the recession for this year if the various interventions and policies and monetary actions are sustained and improved upon. And I spoke with a few guys who had a panel yesterday of our own post-monetary policy meeting. And yes, a few folks believe that may be a bit of being too optimistic. But taking a lot of things into consideration and having listened to a few industry people in various sectors, in financial services, in real estate, in fast-moving consumer goods and others, I think, yes, we might not have a jolly ride in 2020 like the rest of the world, or most of the rest of the world. But perhaps the recession, even if we're going to have it, may not be as brutal as initially thought. So that, I'm sure, will now begin to calm the financial markets. And I think that actually calmed the financial markets. Look at the Treasury bill, the OMO auction yesterday by the central bank. 114 billion naira was sold. That was a Thursday when we had some repayment. Then look at the rates at which investors bought. That means that foreign portfolio investors in general, are still positive about our own environment. The fear about our FX exchange rates going to the dry cleaners seem to have evaporated a bit, or at least not as it was last month or so, when some folks were saying we'll do 500, we'll do 1,000. That seemed to have slowed down also a little bit. So I think the GDP numbers gave the market and investors a bit of some measure of comfort, even if it's going to be, even if it was one day at a time. So folks can continue to go ahead and plan. But again, the confidence sounding statement of the MPC and God Emefiele yesterday were in order. I expect him as the central bank governor to sound very optimistic and confident. I don't think those statements were misplaced. I think he has the numbers, and he can see the economy. I'm sure hands have touched each other with other economic agents or economic managers within the economy. But again, we must not let our eyes off the ball, as it were. So we need to keep our eyes on the goal, on the target, that a lot more still needs to be done to try to avoid this iceberg, okay, of a Titanic kind of a proportion, because whether by IMF or World Bank projection or by our own projection, a 4% negative reading on our GDP will take us seriously underwater. And it's going to be really worse than 2014, 2015 economic recession. So we need to keep that in mind. Because the revision by the Ministry of Finance talking about 8-point-something%, I think about 8.5 or so percent, and the IMF 4% or so, or thereabout, are not good news. So either way, if we can avoid even the 4% recession, that will be very good. The quick revision of the budget for 2020 was good. Now we're doing at least solid $35 per barrel on the Brent, which is our benchmark. Again, so we have at least, as of today, we had about $10 headroom. As we see more economies in Europe and the US and Asia reopen, then we see demand for energy consumption coming back on track. That will help. Supply is being held on very well by OPEC+. That's also some good news. But then we have a few areas to fix. How will our current expenditure is there, but our capital expenditure still has to be upgraded. We need this critical infrastructure that we've started building over the last 5 years under the current administration. Then we're now asking for more money from elsewhere around the world. I think yesterday, Mr. President sent to the Senate some papers for about another $5 billion. So we're borrowing left, right, and center. That means the administration believes that, yes, there's a lot of work to be done on the CAPEX side that needs to be fixed. We can't let our exchange rate down through the roof. So we need to keep a lot of things burning, have a lot of fire, we have a lot of stick in the fire that we're managing at the center. So it's a bit, it's not an easy time for our economic managers, both on the fiscal side and on the monetary side.
And even the finance minister just rolled out VAT exemptions again, about 878 items. That again will have an impact on economic activities as we see.
Yes, I think that is good. The Inland Revenue Service, the FIRS, have also issued at least the last two that I read through, the folks at PwC Nigeria, relates to tax matters relating to real estate investment companies in the market. I think that came out yesterday in terms of the comment from Oyedele and the rest of them, who's a partner at PwC Nigeria. Previously, there was another a circular from the Federal Inland Revenue Service relating to in the market issues relating to securities lending, what you call the registered securities lending, securities that are approved by the SEC for lending in the market. What are the withholding tax, this, whatever tax that are applicable. Some of these are coming through. So the financial services industry, with the FIRS, the stock exchange, the SEC, they've been very busy. Try to find ways to ease things for those who are investing in the market, make sure that folks' wealth are not significantly eroded, and there's some measure of wealth preservation within this pandemic period for those who are investing in various assets classes. We don't stifle the securities market, for example. So the securities lending arrangement is okay. What the FIRS has done was also been explained by the professionals in the market, and look at the benefits of it to those who want to do securities lending, so that you can maintain some liquidity at the equity side. The federal government through the central bank is keeping investors happy, at least comfortable at the debt market, albeit the fact that inflation is now beginning to, if we look at our 1.234, I call it 1.234 inflation reading for the month of April, 12.34%, I call it 1.234 inflation. And now we have our NPR down at 12%. So they're flying close to each other. Where does that leave investors? There's still a lot of liquidity. And there's nowhere else you can park your money right now than in the debt market. If you try exchange rate, you might get bonds. But there's still shortage of FX in the market. If you go to the banks, you know. Yes, the demand is still there. Because of the drop down in rate, at least at the street level, folks who have some small cash in dollar or whatever, other foreign currencies are trying to get the banks, put them under pressure to try to take advantage of that. Keeping the liquidity ratio and the cash reserve ratio unchanged, 27.5%, 30%, I think that's good enough, trying to maintain liquidity, but use the headline interest rate again to cushion things a little bit. Look at it, the central bank also reduces its own intervention money rate from 9% to 5% about this week as well, which is also a welcome development. And I've seen reactions this morning since yesterday afternoon from a number of professional bodies within industrial manufacturing space, commending the decisions of the central bank and monetary policy for cutting interest rates to at least 100 basis points. We may not be able to do as much as other colleagues are within the sub-Saharan Africa, as it were. But again, this is indicative. It's good enough, but still a lot of work. When you cut interest rate, it means a lot of work is done. So what has been done is that the central bank has kicked the ball into the fiscal, monetary policy have kicked it to the fiscal side and said, okay, you've asked for a rate cut, here it is. LCCI, NASIMA, TUC, whatever, NLC, you want lower interest rate, okay, here it is.
Advocated, so you now have it.
Take it, go work with it. So industries, manufacturing, those in the supply chain, logistics and all of that, the banks themselves and all of that will now have to work with the new rate cut. So we have between now and July, which I think is the next policy meeting, to see how we work with this 12.5%, work with it, try to see what we can produce. They try to use it to stimulate not just the traditional sectors we've always carried along, but the new sector now, which is the new baby, the healthcare sector.
Healthcare sector, yes.
Yeah, that's the new baby on the block.
Yes. Yeah. So let's look at the creative industry, which covers from music, movie production, comedy, arts, fashion. Very huge industry.
Huge.
And when you look at the Q1 2020 growth from the National Bureau of Statistics, it showed a 0.33% growth in first quarter 2020, from 0.81% in Q4 2019, and in terms of corresponding quarter, 1.13% in Q1 2019.
Of last year.
So that means that the growth reduced from what happened in corresponding quarter in Q1
year on year,
and of course reduced from the previous quarter. That sector is a huge gold mine. People talk about it. A lot to be on tap. That's not yet to be on the tapped. A lot of opportunities there in that sector.
The creative sector is as big as it can get. If you look at the whole talk about reopening Disneyland or getting
globally,
Universal Studios reopened, these are big institutions where hundreds and thousands of employees are, and then you look at the spending for those who are going there to look at things and enjoy themselves, have leisure and what have you. Hospitality industry is also tied to that. Food, FMCG is also tied to when you have such a big, whether you're having some from ice cream or you're having some pastries while you're there, whatever it is. So technology would also benefit, leverage that. ICT will be there. So it's a whole ecosystem of living. Now, for developed economies where folks have been locked down, so Netflix, YouTube, whatever, everybody's been sitting there, everybody's sitting down at home and watching from home. But the human nature is to go out, like folks did during the Roman Empire. You go to the arena. Arena is where it's happening. So, and where is the global arena these days? You have it online. But again, the human nature is to go out and explore physically and have the feel of the fresh air against your face and against your body. That is the human nature. So there's a limit to sit at home, work from home, sleep at home. We will have to reopen our entertainment and creative sectors. And in Nigeria, we need to begin to find a way to reopen our own creative industry so that folks can perform. I know folks like Alibaba would have seen some of his wealth or his net worth decline a little bit during this. I'm sure shows would have been cancelled. Revenue would have revenue of himself and others would have been impacted. So if we have a way of measuring their wealth, I'm sure by now their net worth would have been down by a few by a few notches. So whether it is Alibaba or Basketmouth or others, the plan that to fully yes, by some banks, I'm sure some chambers. It would also important. You need to do movies production for low now. I hope that they fall under those that the central bank asks banks and other financial institutions to look at the before the. Maybe sometimes he himself wonders.
Supposed to come at the end of this week to advise government on steps to take to intervene in the creative industry.
Fine. Relating to hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people in a hall, for example, and all that. Those interactions will be impacted moving forward by COVID-19. But I hope that as soon as our medical and health folk can get their hands on the virus and pin it down somehow, lives can return to normal, to some measure of normalcy that will allow comedians and others,
Musicians,
AY, the rest of them,
artists and
to be able
strategists.
to go out and do audience shows, for example. A number of them have audience shows on television.
Of course.
With this pandemic of physical distancing, you can't do audience shows.
Yeah.
So that means that their shows on televisions also are being rested one way or the other, or cannot go as planned. TV stations will be affected by that in terms of revenue. So
interesting that the broadcasting sector grew by 1.81%.
Yes, because folks sit down at home, and everybody's watching more television. And with lockdown at home, you better do some advertising spend because folks are at home. And if you have kids at home, even if you don't have the national grid electricity, you have to at least have a few hours a day via generator. So there's a higher consumption, or using generator to power your, either to enjoy it on this little thing, or through laptops or television. So you've seen a lot of creative works done also on television by the telecom companies and a few others, advertising their products on desktop television and all of that. So the broadcast industry also enjoyed a bit. The whole multi-billionaire spending in keep safe, work at home, and all of that. The television folks and radio made most of those monies. So you don't. So that's where the Q1 growth for the broadcast industry came from. It has to be spent. World Health Organization, NCDC, others were spending. So a lot of spending on television. So broadcast industry had benefited from the pandemic, as it were. But back to creative industry.
I just want to chip in. You know, our last conversation with Mr. Obiasika, who's also an expert in the industry, was saying that it's time for the industry to get partnership with the financial markets. In terms of leveraging the financial market. I know that in 2012, Mr. Alibaba became the first one of the major entertainment experts to ring the bell. You know, this ceremonial closing bell of the year.
The Nigerian Stock Exchange.
All the dealing members keep saying, we need to see you partner with us. We need to see happening some maybe labels or companies listed on the exchange. How can we really drive this vehicle to the capital market to support and unlock the potentials of the creative industry? I also remember that the Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers had a conference where they looked at the creative industry. It was a very interesting.
In 2001, just about 19 years ago, I did an interview on radio. I was running a radio show alongside other TV shows I did then. It was called Broad Street Radio or Star FM. And I had Kenny Ogungbe, who's one of the icons of Nigeria's entertainment industry on this 6:30 a.m. radio show on one of the editions back then. And I said, Kenny Ogungbe and D1, you know, they're the Siamese twins of the entertainment industry. And I said, you're running a label and you're running shows. When do you see yourself, Kenny Music, go on the stock exchange? And I remember his answers, part of his response nearly 20 years ago. And he says, look, we will get there. The industry is still young. Most of the practitioners in the industry are running as quote-unquote one-man business. So it's a talent and an idea thing, okay? Even though a couple of them, many of them do have corporate identity. So Alibaba does have a corporate identity. I'm not sure I can call him directly. Now someone else will have to pick the call and say, would you want to speak with? Do you have a booking? Do you have an appointment? And what have you? So I like that. But to have record labels come to the market, it now becomes a totally different issue. And if you look at the record labels that have been in existence over the years, the Premier Records, the Premier Records, the Ibukolu Records in Mushin and the rest of them. In the early days of my career in print journalism.
And don't forget Storm 360. And
the rest of them. So you will thought that, these were record labels that were different in those days. None of them made it to the market. And the new generation ones therefore need to approach the market. I will give it to the Nigerian Stock Exchange principally.
The Hollywood industry, which employs over 1 million people.
Yes, but for both movies and music.
Yeah.
The fashion industry, if you add that as the third leg, is huge.
Yes.
If you look, for example, at what the AFDB is doing with Fashionomics, Fashionomics Africa, something like that, which is dedicated to the fashion industry in Africa. So. And you've seen big banks like GT Bank, like Access, and a few others have their own fashion.
Performing arts.
Yes.
I mean, EcoBank partnered with Terra Culture.
Yes.
That's interesting work by Bolanle Osteopaths. Yeah.
So, some of these are coming up. Yeah. I want to see some of these brands listed on the market. In those years ago when you had House of Mofeshi, you have Sophisticat in Maryland, you have the big boys in Surulere, Allen Avenue, Okwebi, who are big names in terms of fashion design. Okay, Dakova and Nikkei Fashion and the rest of them. Some of them were no longer around. A few are still around. And we thought over time that they will be able to approach the market. I think it is time now for those who are in the investment or securities market to approach them and see how they can bring them on. Because once you bring them onto the market, it makes the business they're doing, the enterprise, a lot bigger. Yeah. It also makes continuity is also there and sustainability is also there. So, so I still call on Alibaba, I called on Kenny, Ogungbe, the rest of them, to Fashionista and the rest to, sorry, by the way, I covered entertainment a little bit, in general reporting, before I mainstream business and finance in 1992. Wow. So that's a story for another day. So I know a little bit about fashion and entertainment industry very, very well.
You must at least know if you're going to make it.
So I know these guys, and I've always wanted that. How do we? So coming from there and coming into the financial services, okay, how do we bring these guys into the marketplace? Yeah. So the handshake that is currently on between the central bank and the creative industry folks should be extended to the SEC, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and NASD, okay? Even if they're going to go through the FMDQ to say they want to raise commercial paper or they want to do a floated bond to have a mega show or whatever, we need to let it happen. The support being given by the central bank is good. Okay, that's for financial, that's as far as banking, credit, expansion, whatever it is, growth. But to make it sustainable, we need to have these record labels, these movie guys in Nollywood and all that, come to the market. Yeah. And I'll put that right on at the doorstep. I'll pin it on the door. And Ajumale. Yes, I think the three of them should
do that advocacy.
Yes. This quartet can help us bring entertainment and creative industry, broadly speaking, onto the marketplace. We need some of them to approach the same way. I advocate that we have some guys in the sports industry also come onto the market.
Sports is also
it's just they're just like same side of the coin.
Current Minister of Youth and Sports, Mr. Sunday Dare, has been working extensively with stakeholders to see how they can reposition sports. And like you said, the financial market plays a key role. But as we begin to wind up, let's look at assets and infrastructure. Fine, the pandemic, we don't have live shows and activities. But the Central Bank of Nigeria identified one of our very esteemed assets, which has been there, follow, when you pass through Igomu side. That's the National Arts Theatre. And they want to work and transform that place. I remember several years ago, Alibaba and Baskema said, look, if we had that host shows, this would have been a viable facility. So it's good to hear CBN say they want to work to revive that asset. But what would you be advising in terms of managing it and the whole process?
I always I watch a lot of television by virtue of my of my secular work.
I have to watch,
and we still do not have any event center of international standard and repute in Nigeria. And I don't want to mention names of hotels so that they don't bar me from they don't bar me from going in there. There, it's an anomaly that you're using hotels where you have folks sleeping in their various rooms, host certain events, anywhere in the world, including South Africa. So you go to Sandton Conference Center, for example. You go to any
O2 Arena in the UK.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we need to have arenas
Yeah.
like you have a building in Dubai. Then Saudi Arabia was about working on their own before the pandemic started.
Yeah.
We need to build arena for Alibaba, AY, Basket Mall, the rest of them to do shows, and which can sit 5,000, 10,000 at once, just like the opera.
Yeah.
Okay? So we need to build it. It is time for the banks to come together. Maybe the bankers community should just build it. I just don't understand.
So that National Theatre can become that template
See,
for
just build it.
everything.
Just build it like the opera in London. Just build it. The bankers committee can put 20 billion or 10 billion naira down. Build it. They can jointly own it. Put an SPV or special vehicle behind it, and list that particular special vehicle on the stock exchange, or use it to do commercial papers or whatever. It will deepen the market. It's a big real estate facility. It will have everything from cameras, all the entire 9 years, the whole 9 years. We need it, okay? Because when you attend a few of the shows and you look at locations where they are held, they're not conducive for such things. That's not where you go.
So it's purpose built.
It's purpose built.
Car parking space, everything
the whole
fits in.
idea behind the Festac, the National Art Theatre, which came during the Festac 77.
Yes.
It's just something that we just didn't leverage on over the decades, and we allowed that national asset to rot, and the folks who are in the creative industry had to start living from hand to mouth and try to find their own. Fela Anikulapo, for example, the great Sonny Ade, King Sonny Ade, Ebenezer Obey, the rest of them, or Sadebe and the rest of them, would have loved to have a grand arena to perform. When they go overseas, they perform at such places. Yeah. So you can talk about 50,000 people. And you know what? Folks from around the world will come in to watch such shows. But when you hear, where is this show taking place? It's going to be in one, I don't want to mention event centers around it. So we start using event centers, which are there for just basically chieftaincy ceremony, birthday, naming ceremony, and things like that. And we're using it for shows like that. It's not conducive. The sitting arrangement, the whole ambience. It's not, imagine if you want to go watch a movie and it's under the bridge, and because chairs are put together. How comfortable is that? We go to a normal theater. Yeah. So it makes sense. So the look and feel, the entire environment is there. Then the appurtenances that go with it make it feel really this is where you need to be, and you enjoy the taste of it. That is investment. When we turn the National Art Theatre to that particular thing, that's what the Central Bank and Bankers Committee are working on. That is exactly what to bring. You see, the size of that real estate, just imagine what that would be on the books. If you list it, 5 billion, 10 billion, you just bring it to the market. And then the entire environment, like you rightly said, will just become something else. So we want to wait for the Alibaba's committee report. Yeah. But I think Alibaba should also pull the ears of Oscar Oyema. I know they're close to say, look, I think I'll ask Oscar should be the one pulling the ears of Alibaba and say, look, you can't just befriend the central bank. You need to also be here at the stock market, at the securities market. Definitely. I think Alibaba can do the two together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll have this conversation further with him around, and it will be much robust, but very important. You can see that the creative industry is very critical and brought to the mainstream policy. And
you want to create jobs? That is the quickest way.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Bosun. It's been nice having you through the week.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Policies and all critical sectors. Mr. Bosun Mofe, CEO from Africa Reports. We'll have to do this again next week.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And that'll be all for this week edition of the Market Review. Join the conversation. Log on to www.prosng.com to watch our videos, read our reports and news stories and analysis. Till we come your way again, thank you for watching. Have a nice day and stay safe.